And then I think while we're doing that, we should just turn back towards you all who patiently listened to us for over an hour and ask if the audience has any questions for us or for the.
I just have a question for Pablo about whether you ever looked at Lee Friedlander's American Monuments or any of those traditions?
I almost pirated that book. I was living in England, and my wife worked teach at a university there, so we discovered that we have these interlibrary loans. And I checked, and in the British Library they had the book that is almost impossible to find in South America. So we asked for the book, and the book arrived at home, and we have the book for a month. But I was saying, how I do to keep this book here? And so I don't know if you know the book. The book have two metal bolts, so you can unscrew them, and you have the pages. So I scanned it, but the pages are too big, so I scanned it in twice, and so I spent like a month putting it together in Photoshop. So I have a PDF of the book. And that's it, I have it.
It's a monument.
And it's an amazing book, but also the monument, of course, is a tradition in photography. I'm aware of that, and in the French expeditions and in all the early photography, and then in the American tradition, the North American tradition, you have from Walker Evans to Robert Frank, and in some of the images of Americans, for example, you have 2 or 3 monuments in the book, I guess. And of course, you have Friedlander, that is like master of monuments, and it's a very, very. I will love that they reprint that because it will be really, really valuable.
I know where there's a copy, but I'm not going to tell you. Does anybody else have a question or a comment?
Thank you, first of all, for being here and sharing your work with us. I've loved seeing all the range of what you do, and I was wondering, one of the things that kept coming to my mind, as someone who studied photography in high school, right when we were kind of shifting from being in the darkroom to then going all digital, I wanted to get your thoughts on having maybe worked in photography through these different time periods where technology changes. What do you feel is lost and what is gained in that transition?
I've been quite far from the experience of this transition because on one side my work very early started to open towards other media. So since maybe 2002 I have been doing installation or video work or writing stuff, so I have not been conscious of being working with photography with big letters. So for me the change in the medium is secondary, and now I still work, for example, at times with my darkroom. I love darkroom. It's one of the bad things that it is, of course, absolutely real, is that material is much more expensive, it's much more difficult to find, but I managed to find some stuff, and I keep printing things in black and white or even in color in chemicals sometimes. And when I think that the project is not working well in analog, or that projects that I have done in analog format and that I find that the digital instruments can make the work better, I just switch and scan the negatives and work them digital. So for me it's a tool, like a pen. So you just make use of the tool as you need it. Yeah, that's from my perspective.
Yeah, in my case, for example, in this case, these are 4x5 film, color film, but a darkroom lab in Lima destroyed a big part of the project. So to rescue the project, I have to scan and retouch in order not to have to go back. But my last project, for example, is all digital, but because of the situation that I have to do it. So I don't have any problem to cross. But of course, it's annoying that you have to search for material now, because all the restrictions in airplanes, you can buy some chemicals from Kodak here and send it by plane nor by boat to Lima. So there's no way to use it. The stuff exists. You have it here in the shops, but you can use it. But of course, there's a side. I was trained as a fine printer, in darkroom fine print. I was assistant of many Peruvian photographers, and of course, when I studied cinema, I learned how to edit film with Moviola. So I'm like a museum piece. In that, my training was being in analog
But that was something I found to be very strong, is that there were artists still working in analog, despite, or being able to do both, but there was still this very strong analog tradition that came, I would assume, from the earlier groups and from Sequencia, and this almost, darkroom rat kind of obsession with getting in there. Like Milagros de la Torre, for example, still talks about how much she just loves to be in the dark room and teases out what she can from that experience.
But filmmakers will say the same, that, of course, there's something lost. It's obvious. Your relationship with the material, the time-consuming thing, but at the same time, you think during that time. So it's not that you are working with a blank mind. You are thinking, and the way, for example, that you can see now the contact sheets of Luz Maria, or that you can see books of, the contact sheets of the Americans. That's the most amazing learning experience, because you can see the sequence and the way that what image was picked from them and how they cut it. So you learn a lot. I guess now with digital files will be super difficult, because you can delete it, and I don't know if you have some kind of sort of crazy order, and you will. I think there's something there that gets lost. And also, if you are working with a very, very low budget, if you have the money to make the project like this, you are very careful of how many pictures you made, and most of these cases is just one negative, that's it, because it's expensive to find a film, and that makes you more like aware of what you are doing. Of course, if you have a camera that they use, where you can make 2,000 pictures, you are like,
one good one.
The thing that I feel that if you don't think when you are too much there, you push the thinking forward, and then you have all these thousands of images in the computer that you have to start thinking, edit there. So you have a pre-editing thing with the film.
So it happens.
But I'm not saying that it's better or worse. I think is that it will be really nice. It's a good balance. So that for example, scanners are disappearing now. So even in the digital world, there are some obsolescence of things that are useful. So Epson doesn't make a scanner, I guess, at least for 8 years or 7 years, a kind of good one. And so you have that.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Yeah. Do you have that?
Well, if you want to stay, if anybody wants to nap or leave, they're more than welcome.
So I think that especially Fernando and Luz Maria, but I think that in most of you talked about either lack of traditional kind of higher level fine art education, photography, and maybe I would like to flip this around, and because of like the rich educational background of Fernando and Luz Maria, especially the two of you have, like in different disciplines, like looking back now, several years later, do you think there were any advantages of this kind of mixed background, educational background, that affected the way that you work?
Photographic education. My photographic education started again by accident. When I was in high school, I was very fortunate to make friends with Jay Colton, who later became a photo editor for Time magazine. And his father was the chief editor, photo editor for Associated Press. And so when I went to his house, which, believe it or not, in New York, they always had the door open. So, after school, I just opened the door and went to his house and sat and waited for him. So we had different schedules. And there was an incredible collection of photography books and an incredible collection on the walls of Pulitzer Prize winning photographs. And so just by being there, I got an education. And while I waited for my friend, I pulled, books from the shelves, and that's where my education began. And the only time I had any formal training in photography was, as I said before, as to the literature of photography when I was doing my dissertation in philosophy. And then at Rice, when once again, even though it had nothing to do, but I felt like it, I convinced the philosophy department to let me take a color photography course with Jeff Winningham, who was a professor at Rice at that time. And there, that's what it is. And then, you're floating in the world, picking up ideas.
But I think she's asking.
I think that my question is specifically related to your study of philosophy or Luz Maria's studies of literature. Like, how do you think that it affected the way that you photograph? Like, or what is the impact of the liberal arts or humanist education on the way that you think is
how I photograph or what I photograph?
both?
Well, I mean, there's several components. I think, if you hear both Pablo and Luz Maria talk about what their concerns are, for example, she avoids a certain kind of landscape. Pablo wants to find meaning in monuments that is not kind of readily visible. I mean, something that kind of you think about. And so as an artist, you bring all that background in order to select what you're going to shoot and also how you're going to shoot it. Are you going to take it from what you find, or are you going to stage it, or are you going to manipulate the image, or, along the way, you kind of pick the way you want to deliver the message, because I think that is a very important aspect of any work of art, how it is that you're going to deliver. And I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but that's how I'm understanding your question.
Yeah, I would say that it's curious because I didn't have a formal education in photography, but on the other hand, I participate from very close with the foundation, La Fundación, the Open Foundation of Gaudí. That was the first professional school of photography in Peru, and I was a teacher. I didn't study there, actually, as Adam said, I actually was a teacher there from where I was very, very young, like 21 years old. I started being a lab assistant, and then Billy Hare gave me his photo course, and I was teaching that. And so I have been a teacher like for more than 20 years now in a photographic school. And what I understand that I have been doing all these years, because I have given very different courses along the time, is trying to teach people or to train people or to make people think how to do photography being out of photography. I don't know if that has any sense, but I feel that's a very interesting place to be, because if you are all the time inside the medium, inside photography at least, you are like kind of a very narrow thing, no? That in a way, I think that's what Fernando is also saying. You are being informed by several different aspects in your life, and so in my experience, not have been trained formally made me think slower, maybe a little tougher. I made a lot of mistakes. Maybe I made exhibitions before I should have done them in my very, very youth, because I didn't know how to distinguish quality in my work. But then, on the other hand, I was like doing a kind of patchwork, following my instincts and my kind of own education, visiting things, museums or readings or music or film or different things. No, that finally I think that that has been richer than having a 5 or 4 year narrow education very straight into the media. Pablo has, I think, the same experience in a different way because he was studying cinema in Cuba, no? And also it has to do with your interest. I mean, being a good reader or being a good listener of music or being interested in philosophy or whatever is always a very good tool to do art or to think or to work. No?
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yes, I have something.
Okay.
First, I want to appreciate you all for coming tonight and sharing your work. I'm kind of a beginner to Peru and some of the processes that or experiences you've had to go through, and it kind of shines a little bit of a light on both the difficulties and tragedy that the country has gone through, but the resilience of the people coming back through that. And I think some of your photographs share that. And while that wasn't necessarily individually your purpose, I'm curious to see where you see the future going, particularly in Peru, as it relates to the arts. Are you seeing education, arts in the educational side, or funding from nonprofits and other organizations that are encouraging the arts to kind of shine a light on both the culture of Peru and the tremendous history and biodiversity that it has, as well as just moving forward with expression and freedom?
I'm very pessimistic, so
We
I
both
think,
are.
yes, I think that it depends. In June we have the second round of the elections, so if Fujimori daughters win, you have your answer. You know, we are going back to some sort of dark ages of culture and knowledge and freedom and that's for sure. But that's the future. But right now, from my, not just as an artist, but from the place of running an independent nonprofit space, against some sort of kind of weird commercial boom of art with two art fairs happening at the same time, like 10 minutes away, one from the other, and I guess we are trying. It's this kind of weird game, like we are like, ¿cómo se dice? Haciendo como.
Making as if.
Yeah, making as if we have a super strong art scene and we are not.
Yeah.
Now we are having, for the first time in history, a pavilion in Venice Biennale. Last year was the first Peruvian representation. Before, for example, Peru participate without. You were in Venice Biennale in what year?
2005.
And you have to find the money to go.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, you have to look for, because you don't have, you are representative of your country, but your country gives you just the logo, you know, it's like, that's find the money.
Yeah.
But also Peru was in Treviso, that is, you know.
Not when I went.
For some long before it was in Treviso. You have to take a train there, so you weren't in the Biennale.
The Peruvian Pavilion, the Latin American Pavilion, was 1 hour away from Venice.
But now we have, and Raymond and Gilla were the first Peruvian selection in this. But it's not a national pavilion, actually. It's again, the state just put the logo and maybe some facilities, I don't know. And then there's a private money picking up some sort of concurso. Contest. Yeah. There's a curators put some ideas about what show will be there, and there's a selection. But again, if you are in Venice and you don't know nothing about the country, and you see a pavilion and you see the work of Ramon and Gilda, you could think that there's something stronger behind them. And I guess it's more like a mirage. It's more like a kind of. So then you have 2 art fairs, but you just have 3 proper commercial galleries.
And 1 museum, which is a private museum, which is the only museum where you get down to it, and it's actually functioning as a national museum because the National Museum.
But that
is a
museum,
disaster.
also have to do subastas. What's the name?
They have to auctions and
Auctions
fundraising
on summer in the
yeah.
beach, where rich people go spend the summer to sell work from artists that donate work in some sort of percentage, and then they find money to run the rest of the year. So it's a really precarious thing. It has the kind of appearance that we are in a kind of better situation, but I'm very critical to that. And again, in some sort of way, always a response to that, and at the end of, by September, the 18 artists that have been showing there, just 2 will have a commercial gallery in Lima. So that gives you an idea of what people have been showing work there. And yes, it's not just arts, of course, it's music and it's literature and it's poetry and it's film. And we were always working by our own, really. That's the way. And that's the way we learn, so you keep doing it and that's it. But it will be great that you don't have art magazines and you don't have. So it's a kind of, you have a lot of holes, as I mentioned before, that make, because you can at the end choose if you want to be a kind of independent artist or a commercial artist. You just have one section of the thing. In another place, you can sort your way through the mess of things. But the commercial problem the problem with contemporary art and art fairs in this case everywhere.
Yes.
Small galleries everywhere are closing because they can't deal with the moment. And Garou is closing in September also. So it's not.
Just so you know that he says he's going to close Garou when he's in a good mood, which means when he's positive and he thinks that things are moving forward in Peru, but when he's in a bad mood, he wants to keep it open.
If I may take the opportunity, I want to go back a little bit to Secuencia, about which we haven't spoken that much actually, and also to the particular personality of Fernando La Rosa, because what Pablo is saying, kind of Fernando overcame. He overcame all or maybe some or all of those difficulties for his personal traits. First of all, he has a very charismatic personality. Secondly, he came to study at MIT, with Minor White, and he wanted to give knowledge back to many people. And also he had this incredible work ethic. And so he seduced many people to donate money for the Secuencia project, which is very difficult to do, as you probably realize, with all your projects of exhibition spaces. It's very difficult in Peru to convince wealthy people that art is worth having, or that culture in general is worth having. And a lot of people will play lip service, Here, I find many people are, adamantly tell you that they are not interested in culture. In fact, if you are an intellectual, they look at you with some disdain and scorn you. It's like somehow you're a, pinko kami, homo. In Peru, it's nothing like that. In Peru, people would say, would admire, take off their hats for poets, they take off their hats for, but in the end, they don't pocket out what it needs to be done in order to save at least contemporary culture, right? We were just talking with my wife Teresa about, the architecture that we have lost in the 20th century Lima, for example. It has all been demolished, because in Peru, nobody thinks that an Art Nouveau piece of architecture is worth saving because it's only 100 years old, whereas we are keeping pre-Columbian sites that are 2,000 years old. So there's all these kind of contradictions in Peruvian relationship to culture and to art especially that, need to be sorted out. I don't think anybody has systematically sorted out all of these idiosyncrasies.
Well, is there time for one more? Does anybody have one more, or should we just give the artists a round of applause and thank them for coming all the way here? All right.